Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, the scandal mongers are at the governor's doorstep. Also, the V-Team takes a look at the new ethics chief. And is Mike Hubbard on the ropes? I think so, and we're going for a knockout. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There has been, surrounding Governor and Mrs. Bentley, a host of rumors. Scandal mongers are trying to make the smallest detail of their life a salacious rumor. We have gone back and looked at the history of Ray Lewis's pay and found that Ray Lewis, his body man, was paid appropriately according to the other body men that worked for Siegelman and Riley. We have now looked at the flight logs for the governor and first lady and the social media and married them together. And what we find is that except for January of this year, up until the day that the filing for the divorce was announced, the Bentleys were on the plane together some 21 times. They texted each other and tweeted together loving remarks. This doesn't sound like the scandal we're hearing, Susan.
No, it doesn't. In fact, I think on Diane Bentley's birthday, the governor said, you know, happy birthday to my sweetheart, my best friend.
Right.
So, and this wasn't too very long before the divorce papers were filed.
Yeah, that was all on Facebook and tweeted out. Yes.
It was. And there was a lot, it was very, you know, like you and I would do.
Right. I mean, Jack said that to her. She's thanked God for her husband on his birthday and what a great man he had been. She goes to this one meeting and says, I never thought in my wildest dream I'd be first lady, and here I am, and I'm so proud of it. This does not sound like marital discourse, does it, Jack?
It does not.
No.
It doesn't. And I don't know. I have mulled this over, as we all have. Is it believable or not? And in my heart of hearts, I don't think that Governor Bentley is having a sexual affair with Rebecca Mason. I don't believe
I agree
it.
with you. I mean,
I have to agree.
And I think we've all been, you know, looking at everything, but so much has just been twisted out there. But when you get the real facts, when you do the background information like the two of y'all have done and get all the records, it just doesn't add up what people are saying out there.
Well, I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead. You and I have both experienced it where you're working closely with a man.
Absolutely.
And the wife gets jealous. It happens every time, whether there's
And we're
anything
not saying
going
that's
on or
what
not.
happened
No.
there either.
Right.
No.
But as a communications or a senior advisor, and you travel with whatever, if it's a cabinet officer or a senator or congressman or whatever, you spend more time with them than their spouse is going to spend with them unless they travel. I've been there in those shoes, did it for 12 years in D.C. I understand. I just do not believe that our governor is having a sexual affair. He may
I agree.
adore her, love her as a person, because when you spend that kind of time with somebody, you're going to care about them as a person and an individual.
But we all know this town, if there's a slightest hole of facts, rumors flood it, right? I mean, just
Well,
all
wait,
over the
shouldn't we
place.
back up? Don't we think that there's also some elected official that's trying to bloody up Governor Bentley to make himself look better, which there's no possible way
Can't
for
think
the
of who
speaker?
that might be.
I mean, there's just no possible way. I think that the speaker and his minions and cronies are feeding some of these frenzies to try to make the governor look bad.
I
have
don't
to
doubt
agree.
that. I mean, who has to gain from the governor looking bad? Mike Hubbard. Mike Hubbard stands the most to gain because we know Bentley's going to testify against him. And let's face it, Bentley's reputation has already been hurt a little bit This hurts a lot. But do you think it has something to do with this trial?
Do I? Yes, I do. I believe that Bentley is going to go testify, and it's not based on anything that I know or I've heard, but my gut tells me he's going to go testify that yes, indeed, Mike Hubbard came to him as Speaker and lobbied him on behalf of a economic development client.
Yeah.
And if you make Bentley look bad and discredit him by saying, oh, he's a womanizer and all this stuff, that somehow might taint his testimony. And I say, au contraire.
Anybody who's met Governor Bentley knows he's not a womanizer. He's anything but that type of personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and weren't there also these rumors, or maybe some factual, that his lawyer, Mark White, was trying to say, oh, Mike, go over there, Speaker Hubbard, go over there and cut a deal and say, you'll support all these taxes
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
do
yeah,
what you
yeah.
can, because then, I understand there was so many rumblings from these freshman House members and other House members that said, we were just shocked. We thought that the Speaker would never support all these taxes. And then he comes in this last special session and goes, we need to support all these taxes.
And a lot of those freshmen turned against him.
And they absolutely
Yeah,
did.
it's been crazy to watch all this. I tell you, one of the things that's been really shocking, and it's finally getting some press and finally getting some traction. You know, several months ago, we reported that Patricia Todd had taken a job with the Human Rights Commission, a good organization, promotes lesbian, gay, transgender rights. Nothing wrong with those folks. But she got an ethics opinion. At the time, we questioned how she could work for them and still be in the legislature. They got an opinion from the Tom Albritton that said it was okay for her to lobby in her job.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
It's a scary thing is Patricia Todd has been used and set up by Mike Hubbard. Now, the other question I want to know, is there a lawyer, a contract lobbyist that lobbies for the human rights organization as well?
Yeah, that's Ted Haas.
Okay,
And he represented...
and he wrote this opinion and gave it to Tom Albritton.
That's what we hear. We wrote a story, then we wrote another story, and then Dick Brubaker and Gerald Dial, helped write the original ethics law, came out and said if Albritton and them didn't get their act together, the legislature was going to take this thing over and make them do right. I tell you, this ethics commission can be shut down, couldn't they, Claire?
Yes, they absolutely can shut this down. And with the budget crunches, when you've got Attorney General's office, you got DAs everywhere, and the ethics commission has never had, they're a toothless tiger anyway. So it could be shut down easily if these members want it shut down.
Well, it's just crazy, these opinions, Jack. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, I haven't. And to Susan's point about Tom Albritton getting ticked off and very angry that he's being questioned.
In fact,
Since when is an elected official allowed to be a lobbyist simultaneously?
And why is he getting all festered? Because, my understanding is the organization that Patricia Todd works for also already has a contract lobbyist on the Hill from a very well-known law firm out of Birmingham.
Yeah, it's Ted Haas.
Ted Haas,
yeah.
Yeah, and he and all his people are very close with the Speaker. And, my understanding from numerous sources all over is that Ted Haas pretty much, gave Albritton the words to write in this opinion.
Well, we've heard the same thing. It could be a cut and paste job. You never know.
Well, either way, it's egregious. I'm telling you, it's out of control right now.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V. We'll be right back with more news and analysis.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Now, you ladies are a little cranked up, and I know, Claire, you had something more you wanted to say, and I agree with you. This thing is outrageous.
Well, you know, I'm so tired of people talking about conspiracies. Mike Hubbard and his cronies talked about conspiracies. Well, finally, a year and a half later, after what y'all have reported, and it all came out in the emails in the courts, it's not a conspiracy. People don't believe it's a conspiracy. And then the fact that you're going to say that the Ethics Commission thinks there's a conspiracy over here when the attorney generals and DAs that are law enforcement people that uphold the rule of the law. And my understanding was there was a 4-1 or 3-1 split.
4-1
There was
opinion.
clearly some gentleman on a woman that did not think this opinion was kosher.
Well, even the AG's office, along with all the DAs across
Correct.
the state, have written a letter to the Ethics Commission saying this is not proper and that they need to reverse this.
And I have a question. Did she accept a check from her organization before getting clearance?
No, I don't think I don't know the answer. We'll have to look that up. One thing we did learn is that All Britain has now said that they are going to revisit that opinion, but only after the pressure came down from the Attorney General, from the DAs, and now from legislators. You don't want to get on Gerald Dial and Dick Brubaker's bad side.
Look, I
Well,
mean,
maybe
really
he just
don't.
doesn't need to let some contract lobbyists lead him down a dark, bad alley.
Yeah.
That kind of appears what happened, and I'm sorry if that happened to Mr.
Well, I don't
Albright.
know if he's green or if he's corrupt, but either way, something needs to.
Well, for the record, let's just say he's green. How about that?
All right. Listen, I tell you, talking about green, you know, we were all in favor, well, I was in favor of Terry Latham, you know, becoming the chairwoman of the party. She's a good, solid Republican, we believe. But then this last week, she came out and sent out a newsletter praising the Republican supermajority for passing taxes, Jack.
I read that and I absolutely could not believe it. And unfortunately, somehow I get 2 copies of it. So I got mad twice. Reading what she wrote about, oh, well, you know, kudos to the legislature for passing a budget and getting out of this financial crisis. She fails to mention that taxes go against every grain of every Republican who has supported the GOP since God knows when.
Amen. And I can't imagine that the people on the executive committee support that. And if she was a Ronald Reagan Republican, and hello, good morning, Vietnam, that is their constitutional duty, is to pass a budget.
Right.
That they have to pass a general fund and an education budget. Other than that, they don't have to do anything when they're in session.
But they don't have to pass taxes.
No, and she wasn't even around during when they were trying to pass this budget. There was no leadership there.
I mean, that's the thing. You know, she's got abilities. She's got time. I mean, no one should be praised for passing taxes if you're a
Well, you know,
Republican.
what they really ought to do is a state party, just because, you know, I know we've all looked and researched this, and you look at South Carolina, North Carolina, once again, Indiana, New York, and I want to make the viewers aware of this. You know, most of these GOP chairmen and most of these legislators, if you're indicted on anything, the rules say you have to step down.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt Mike needs to go. You know, if Terry Latham would come out and say, look, Mike, it's time. We're going to get into that in a little bit.
It's
but I
tearing
mean,
the party apart. That's the
It
problem.
is.
It
The
is.
brand looks horrible. And for her to be praising something they did was.
praising Mike Hubbard and the leadership, a guy with 23 counts against him, still holding the gavel, and a chairperson saying, oh, great job during the legislative session.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a great job. It was a pretty poor job. They just barely eked out a budget that cuts everybody to the bone. But you know, I tell you, these Republicans are not what we elected, not what we thought. Jack Williams, again, who tried to pass some sneaky stuff through the House, did get it through the House. Also, was lobbying for UAB football while running a fan site that he got paid to run. I mean, this guy, it sounds to me like he could be using his office for personal gain. And now we find out he was working for this Aldridge Garden.
Yeah,
Is that it?
Yeah, as a $40,000 contract from Tynette Lynch, who her husband's Pat Lynch, who on the eve of the budget, the education budget, before J. Love stepped down, happened to do a huge fundraiser at his office here in Montgomery, which is a little bit unethical. And
it was during session.
And it was during session to get rid of his congressional debt. But the fact that he has all this money, Lynch and wife, in the education budget, and they get all these federal grants for this bullying. I've done a little research on it. You call up there for this school bullying, they're getting all these grants, and nobody answers the phone. There's no location. You're talking about waste and abuse and fraud in state government, and you should worry about taking money out of the education budget. Well, these are examples of things that are going on.
Well, I mean, it's crazy that, if it's true, he was working, it says it on his ethics form, he was working for Aldridge Garden, and a lobbyist is
and his
registered
statements of
lobbyist.
financial interest list siblings with different names, different filings.
Well, he doesn't
Changes
know who
every
his
year.
children are.
Well,
He doesn't know his
He's got
children
two
are.
boys.
But he forgets to put them on and off, and his brother and sister and
One
everybody.
year he'll have one brother on, the next year he'll have the other brother on, one year he'll have one son on, then he'll have two of them on, then he won't have any on there.
Well, the IRS is probably going to flag that.
There's
I
no
hope so.
more self-serving sleaze bag in the Alabama House than Jack Williams.
And he was trying to help Mike Hubbard.
And he's one of Mike Hubbard's minions.
Well, and that's one of the
And
things.
I'm very sad that because I've always liked Jack. He was elected in Jefferson County. He'd been a long-time Republican, but it just shows you in these last 6 or 8 years what power and greed can do to people.
These
and
guys,
it's just saddening.
These guys will sell their soul for more
money.
power, more money. One of the Jack helped with some of these shenanigans, this trickery and deceit. But one of the things we found interesting, and we checked this with several people. We wrote a story about it. The Porch Creek Indians were meeting, or their lobbyists, Philip and Allison Kinney, were meeting with Mike Hubbard in his office during the second special session. Now, they were there with the PCI folks. There was no gaming in the special session. So, Susan, why were gaming interests meeting with Mike Hubbard during the second special
Well,
session?
one could speculate that since the second special session was about passing taxes on behalf of Mike Hubbard, who is rumored to have before that made a deal with Governor Bentley that if he would raise some taxes, that Bentley would make a compact with the Indians. Now, that's just what I've heard.
That's just rumor.
But it's just rumor. But it wasn't even on Del Marsh, even his bill was way back in the closet because they didn't want anything to disrupt this budget process. Why they were there, I have no idea.
Sounds fishy, though, doesn't it, Jack?
Living in Alabama is becoming a fishing expedition.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
Well, was their other partner who was a former House member, was he in this meeting?
Well, no, he wasn't, because he's afraid to go on the 5th floor after we reported he's
Well,
been
he
seen
should
down
be.
there.
He should be. It's breaking the law.
Yeah. Well, you know what I've decided? Mike Hubbard right now, he's sort of like one of these guys that's on Craigslist that's looking for friends with benefits.
And they're lining up to take it.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. We'll be right back in a few minutes. You're watching The V.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. We received the response from the Attorney General's office this week to Mike Hubbard's motions to have the 23 felonies against him dismissed because they were unconstitutional. Susan, when Matt Hart and his team hit back, it was like white phosphorus, more emails, more revelations. I mean, I saw you sitting there with a bag of popcorn and some sweet tea like you were at a football game. Tell us what was in there.
I'm telling you, it was so much fun going through those emails. If you thought the last batch was good, you got a good read coming. Down to things like ingenuity, emailing between him and Mike.
Now, this is one of his lobbyists.
One of his lobbyists, that they would go back and take the lobbyist words out of his contract, that they would put in there that he specifically couldn't be involved in Alabama, although he would represent all 50 states as speakers. I think if he's not going to represent Alabama, isn't that 49?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Love fest between him and Bob Riley. You know, just they've been scheming almost since the very beginning, right after the law was passed, to get Mike all this around.
Well, in February, when they passed the law in December, Claire, they were plotting of how for Bob Riley to be able to pay Hubbard's company like $10,000 to do some work, Reagan Poultry.
I know. Oh yeah, and then you know, Mendes saying, "Oh, you've got to," even though the job is hard and it's long hours, and he complains about the pay. Oh, well, we've worked too hard to get you there. You got to stay there.
Yeah, he was thinking about resigning as speaker, and Mendes like, "Please don't do that."
Really, what he was doing, and finally Riley told him to stop, is he was contacting Will Brook and saying, "Well, I've got your immigration language in the bill like you wanted it," and that was when Will Brook was with BCA. But, by the way, do you have any clients for me yet?
Yeah.
I think it was a threat, because he would say then, well, if I don't get clients, I'm going to have to resign.
That's just egregious. I'm just telling you.
It's full of it.
It's quid pro quo, and we don't even have to have quid pro quo to prove guilt in this state.
And then he goes so far as to say that Charles McCrary, the former power company CEO, and Will Brooks were trying to hurt his livelihood and not give him clients. I mean, was he deranged to write those things?
For a Speaker of the House to be asking prominent business people in this state to help him get clients
that's outrageous.
During a legislative session?
Well, he was asking Bob Riley to get him hostile the whole time.
I know he was even talking about resigning and going to work for BRA, Bob Riley and Associates. I mean, he was poor mouthing. Listen, that power is so important to him. He had any intention in the world of resigning.
It was a threat. That's all it was.
One of the things that I found that was most shocking, in every one of those emails, they are talking about how to make money from state government, but in not one single email did they ever mention how to do good by the people of Alabama. It was all about getting for money for themselves. And Bob Riley's at the center of this whole darn thing.
And
he's just
right
right
around the law with this.
Yeah.
In fact, Hubbard advised Riley to resign as a lobbyist, and he said you can hire, Dax or John Ross for like $1, and they'll do the lobbying for you, and that way I can represent your company. They did all these things to get around the law.
Claire, as a lobbyist, he said, "Oh, well, you just give Dax and John $1, and they'll do all your lobbying, and they'll put you ahead of their paying customers." The paying customers for Dax and John Ross had to like that, didn't they?
Well, I mean, all the Dax and John Ross and Tim, all their clients come from Bob Riley and Mike Hubbard. Yeah. Mike Hubbard and then pick up the phone, and Riley, they say you got to hire them. And they already have contract lobbyists in Montgomery, but they have to double up because you got to hire the little boys, and pay them $100 grand.
Jack, the whole idea that the laws that he championed, that he said would be Riley's legacy, he now wants us to believe, and the court, that they're unconstitutional.
When I first heard that a few weeks ago, that he had been, and we all remember this. This was in December of 2010. Riley was still governor. The very next month, Mike is speaker during that session. We have passed the toughest ethics laws in the country. We're so proud of that. That's part of the handshake with Alabama that we made with you voters, and we're so proud of that. And then to come back 4 years later and say, those laws were unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. If you pass laws and they're unconstitutional, usually within a 6-month period of time, then unfortunately the Attorney General's office, state of Alabama, has to say, represent, the immigrations, the abortion laws, BPCs, all these things that they pass over there that they knowing and willingly know are unconstitutional. Then the Attorney General's office has to defend them from the state, which they rack up a lot of money doing that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have come by 4 or 5 years. It's just because he broke the law. He's been indicted on that, and now he wants to unveil the deal.
He's like a child, really, that gets caught, and mommy and daddy scold him. In this case, it's scolding with going to prison. He goes, well, I don't like those laws. They're not fair.
Well, and the whole point of House Bill 18, sponsored by the elusive Jack Williams, was to now say that being a member of the legislature enables you to go and lobby.
Yeah, well,
so he could go back to court and say, see?
Yeah.
Exactly. He can go back to court and say, look, the laws were unconstitutional.
They were unclear, and we fixed
all that. So now I'm not guilty.
Well, thank goodness they stopped that in the Alabama Senate.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
yeah, well,
and you know what? One thing I'd ask for y'all to do, I think it would be nice for the average citizen, because we talked about all these emails. Why don't y'all put them up online on alpoliticalreporter.com where people can go and read this? Because, the average person, when they see these emails, it is going to, really open their eyes.
Yeah.
That's when these people have seen that had fallen on the sword with Mike Hubbard, even these legislators, when they've seen these emails, they go, oh my, this conspiracy was not a conspiracy.
Yeah.
What he's done is for real.
And for the average viewer, don't read all through the legal jargon. Go straight to the exhibits.
Yeah.
That's where the juicy stuff is.
The other motion that we wrote about this week that the Attorney General's office responded to, Mike Hubbard is trying to have the charges dismissed against him because of vindictive and selective prosecution. He says that Luther Strange wants to be governor in 2018, so he wants to get rid of him. Is that deja vu all over again, Jack?
Yeah, it really is. and as we've learned, Mike wasn't singled out. There have been 26 public officials that have been gone through the process with Luther
during his term,
using their office for personal gain, including Montgomery's own Greg Wren, who resigned for helping, guess who? Mike Hubbard.
So this is not selective prosecution. And the fact that he's been saying this thing about Luther since the before he was indicted.
He told me that personally, and this is not hearsay, standing in a restaurant in Montgomery, when I said, I'm sorry you're going through the grand jury deal. He said, well, Jack, it's what it does to your finances, not your family, but what it does to your finances. And I appreciate that. I guess Luther sees me as a threat down the road.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there.
He thinks a lot of himself.
He really does.
He does.
All right, you've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch news stories every day at AL Reporter. Like us on Facebook, watch us on YouTube, but join us every Sunday for the V.
Mike Hubbard for president of Cell Block B.
Vote for HR 396.
That's Mr. HR 396. Mr. Speaker.
Well, this is probably a Sunday drinking and wine and Bloody Marys when they watch the V.